Okay, so this instalment is going to take you through the second set of chapter 2. So chapter 2.1, which I've already posted, looks at human resource management and organisational structure. And this section is going to look at chapters 2.3 and 2.4, leadership and management and motivation. And then the next instalment of chapter 2 will look at corporate culture and employer and employee relations. So going straight into leadership and management and motivation, the first thing that we have to be able to do is we have to be able to define the difference between a leader and a manager. And our course does identify key differences between these roles, even though quite often we essentially call people interchangeably these terms. The main difference between a leader and a manager is that a manager is there to sort of get the day-to-day job done, to meet targets, and to ensure that their staff meet targets. There are 5 functions of management, and they are described as planning, commanding, coordinating, controlling, and organising. The manager, may be the person who is communicating to the team, who is getting the team to feedback and track that targets are being met. The manager looks at ensuring that the organisation runs smoothly from a day-to-day point of view and perspective. Whereas a leader sort of has a little bit more of a holistic view. And when I say holistic, I mean across the whole organisation. So somebody who can take a step back and look at the sort of mission and vision of the organisation in the long term. A leader is somebody who influences and inspires others to get things done. A leader fosters motivation, respect, trust, and loyalty from the workforce. Leadership is the process of influencing and inspiring others to achieve their organisational goals. And because of this sort of statement here, you can see where the crossover is, why people get described as managers or as leaders. But in the context of, when we look at business, if you're talking about the role of a leader, if you're talking about the actual function of leadership, leaders are quite often those entrepreneurs, the people who represent the big businesses that have made significant changes and significant differences in companies. The people who are the face of companies are often described as the leader. Whereas you may have many managers. Managers might supervise a particular department or a particular division, and these people may look at more small sets of tasks within the company. They may concern themselves just with the finance of the organisation or just with the marketing of the organisation, etc. Whereas a leader usually has to look at the organisation from a wider perspective. There are different styles of leadership, as are outlined by the course. The 4 main styles are what we call autocratic, democratic, paternalistic, and laissez-faire. There are 2 types of paternalistic, positive and negative, that we'll go into in a moment. And then they have what we call situational leadership. And situational leadership is probably actually what most businesses today end up using, because situational leadership looks at the right style for the situation. So when the business is in crisis, it will often turn to an autocratic style because of the nature of the situation. When the business has time to make a decision and a big decision to consider, that's going to impact lots of people, they may choose to approach the situation from a democratic perspective. So businesses that kind of adapt their style depending upon the situation, we would use situational leadership. Whereas the 4 main sort of set types, autocrats are groups that hold decision-making power in a very centralised location, and the employees get told what to do. An autocratic leader does not need to receive feedback from their staff, because they are the only people who will decide the direction of the company. and their sort of decision is final. People don't question an autocratic leader. An autocratic leader is necessary when very fast decision making is necessary, and especially in times of crisis, like I mentioned under situational leadership. And you'll find certain organisation types, military organisations, for example, sometimes um, require an autocratic approach. You need to see one person in clear control who knows what they're doing, who is leading from the front. This is what we are doing, and everybody is going to follow in this same direction. We're not going to stand around and talk about it first. A democratic approach follows that idea of democracy in parliament and in government, whereby people have a vote. Now, it might not literally mean people voting in a company, but it literally means that the employees have a say in how the company works. So a democratic leadership style is a leader who turns to their employees and asks for their feedback, asks for their input. And this obviously can be known to improve and benefit employee motivation, but it was also known to make decision making take a long time. And the delays in decision making can cause problems for businesses in trying to take advantage of opportunities that are out there. The other issue with democracy, of course, is that you're never going to have everyone agreeing at the same time. So your major stakeholders, whether they be your shareholders and your employees, your managers, etc., they all kind of often want different things from the business, and sometimes what they want is conflicting. So when you go through a democratic process, you may just find that, you know, whoever's the largest group is going to have the potentially a louder say, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their perspective is more valuable or more valued than another perspective. So you've always got that kind of risk that the people who don't get listened to are going to feel offended, because, you know, in a democratic organisation, everyone should feel valued. So there are the downsides as well. A paternalistic leadership is the leader who approaches the business in the viewpoint of family and as a father figure or a mother figure. The paternalist literally meaning paternal or father figure. So this person does put the value of the employees high, you know, in their perspective. They see their employees as part of this family approach. But you have two elements to it: the positive paternalists and the negative paternalists. The positive paternalists perceive their employees as being very capable and, you know, and completely trust in their employees, which can be great and very motivational if that trust is well placed and if actually those employees are competent and capable. Whereas you see, if you have a positive paternalist that is actually dealing with people who don't really know what they're doing or are, you know, inherently lazy, then you're going to have problems. And the reverse can be said for negative paternalists. Negative paternalists are quite doubtful over the capability of their staff. They still value their views, but they feel that they need guidance at all times, and they feel that they need, you know, direction, hand holding. So a negative paternalist sort of will ensure that the staff have clear instructions and clear goals, and all of this needs laying out absolutely. And so you might sort of, if you do have staff that are more independent and are more capable, you may actually stifle their creativity in a negative paternalistic environment. A laissez-faire environment means sort of let it go. It means let it be, and within that idea, this idea that a manager can just sort of sit back and allow their business to run around them, allow their employees to choose how they work, when they work, the types and times that they can complete tasks. This is common in highly creative and innovative environments and markets. So elements of the tech industry will use a laissez-faire approach because it is felt that the less interference from a manager, the more potential creativity or innovation workers might achieve. And again, that can backfire in certain environments and in certain situations, but has its place, which is, I suppose, why situational leadership tends to be an option that modern businesses will often turn to. It's very difficult to be a situational leader because that means that you don't have sort of an automatic backstop. This is how I behave. If you can adapt to any of these styles, then that makes you a very adaptive leader in the first place. And as an adaptive leader, that means that you understand the benefit of all of these different styles, and you're not just relying upon your personality and your character, which culturally may lead you to one area rather than another, one style rather than another. In a lot of in a lot of examples. So leadership style for different businesses is going to have a direct impact on motivation. We've got 5 different categories of, or theories of motivation, and we'll start with Taylor. Taylor's motivation theory is called the Principles of Scientific Management. And Taylor's theory essentially revolves around the idea that employees want more money. What workmen want from employers beyond anything else is higher wages. That was a literal quote from Mr. Taylor. Taylor also believed that workers were generally quite lazy and didn't really want to work. So he believed that managers should micromanage every single element of a worker's role, and that we should try and make the role itself as small and as simple as possible. These simple repetitive tasks that they can't get wrong, that they just repeat over and over and over and over again, and we set their output to their pay, their output and efficiency targets to pay. If you make 20 of these, then this is what you get paid. But if you make another 10, then you'll get this more. If you make another 15, you'll get this more, and so on and so forth. So setting output to efficiency. This is a sort of piece rate pay system. You have to remember that Taylor's theory was written back in 1911. So, and it was designed for the time. It was appropriate and applied to sort of factory workers of the turn of the century. So maybe isn't appropriate in all areas today. When we talk about Taylor believing that workers were generally lazy, this is something whereby the theory will have been applied in non-creative, non-problem solving roles, in the kinds of roles that are menial labour, repetitive tasks in the first place. And essentially this is the simplicity of Taylor's principle of scientific management. Taylor is pretty much the only one who puts money as the only way of achieving motivation. Maslow, who wrote his theory in the 60s, he talks about this hierarchy of needs, this pyramid idea. And the hierarchy of needs suggests that you can't achieve the next step in the pyramid until you've got the first step. And businesses can provide these steps within the context of work or the workplace. And so we move through the steps. We have the physiological needs, the safety needs, belongingness, self-esteem, and self-actualization. So in a work context, physiological needs for food, water, warmth, rest, physiological needs may be things like, the ability to go to toilet breaks or drink whilst you're at work. They can be as basic as that. And that obviously is necessary before we can start meeting our safety needs. And in the context of the workplace, not often are we talking about physical safety. I mean, you may be if you're looking at things like the construction industry, where people need hard hats and harnesses and high-vis jackets to be able to feel safe in the workplace. But in safety needs, you're quite often talking about job security, job safety. Do they feel that their contract is secure, or are they constantly at risk of being made redundant, of losing their job? So this is sort of physiological and safety needs. Remember, he believes that you have to have one before you can make the other. So you could have job security, but if you don't have your physiological needs being met, then it's irrelevant. You can't climb the ladder. Belongingness, this talks about relationships, friendships, social needs, this is sometimes called. This, asks the ability to work in teams in a workplace. The opportunity to communicate with colleagues and to have meaningful sharing of good practice and sharing of ideas with colleagues. And that leads on to the esteem needs. The esteem needs being prestige, the feeling of accomplishment, the feeling that you've done something right. Do you ever get positive feedback in your work environment? Does the appraisal system enable positive feedback? Do people have the opportunity to go away on courses and improve their skills and therefore feel good about themselves? We can link various theories into this level of esteem needs. Once we've actually achieved an esteem need, the next step in the pyramid is that idea of self-actualization, achieving one's full potential. And self-actualization is the point at which people can be motivated and can have that drive. This may be necessary, for people to have the opportunity for promotion to achieve one's full potential, or the opportunity to take on more responsibilities, that kind of thing. But Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's a nice theory because it applies neatly to many businesses, because these areas are, pretty vague in the sense that so long as you can justify why you're saying that this is to do with belongingness, if it's to do with social needs, relationships, friends, communication, that kind of thing, then you can apply it to a huge range of case studies. So this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then we have Herzberg, and Herzberg's two-factor theory, or Herzberg's hygiene factors. Herzberg basically said that you've got two categories of things happening in the workplace. And one of them is called the hygiene factor and one of them is called the motivator. And what he essentially said is that the hygiene factors are the basic expectations that staff have. And without them, we can never achieve motivation. But having these does not in itself equal motivation. These are just the expectations that every member of staff has. So some examples here: working conditions, peer relationships, leadership quality, job security, compensation. And when it says compensation, that means pay. So to be compensated for the time that you put in, compensation. A status of some description, having a title. These are the hygiene factors that people have as a basic expectation every day when they come into work. They don't motivate, but absence of them, if these were missing, then it doesn't matter how good your motivators are, you can't achieve motivation. The motivators, according to Herzberg, are split into three categories: job enlargement, job enrichment, and job empowerment. Sorry, brain went blank there for a moment. Job enlargement, job enrichment, and job empowerment. So job enlargement is the process of sort of giving staff more roles of the same level of complexity. So just giving people more things to do. Job enrichment is giving people more challenging tasks to do. And those more challenging tasks can relate to, the possibility of increased responsibility, delegating from managers to get the chance to do something more difficult, and then possibly, feel self-esteem for having achieved something more difficult. And then job empowerment is that ability to make choices and to have control over what you do in your job and how your job gets completed. So some examples of those three motivators: job enlargement, job enrichment, and job empowerment would be responsibility, satisfaction, recognition, achievement, growth opportunities, advancement, things like promotion. So these are real examples within the workplace that would fit into the categories of job enlargement, job enrichment, and job empowerment. So after Herzberg's hygiene factors, we have Adam's equity theory. And Adam's equity theory looks at the idea of a scale. he says that staff should feel that what they put in is equal or equitable to what they get out. So if I put in this amount of time, this amount of effort, this amount of ability, and this amount of loyalty, then I should get back an equal balance in pay, bonus, perks, benefits, maybe respect, recognition, etc. What I actually get back out of my job. But it's not that simple. Adams also said that workers should be able to perceive equity with their peers. So it's not just what they see themselves putting in and what they see themselves getting out, but workers, in order to maintain motivation, should also be able to see what their peers put into their job, what their colleagues put into their job, and what their colleagues get out of their job. And if they perceive their colleagues as putting less in and getting more out, then all of a sudden their scale becomes unbalanced. So Adams' equity theory, when you think about it from the context of the individual worker, is very easy. What I put in equals what I get out. But it's also important in Adams' theory to be aware that they look at their colleagues and they expect their colleagues to have the same level of equity. Otherwise, that in itself is in perception unfair. And then that takes us on to our last theory, the Daniel Pink's drive theory. So Daniel Pink's drive theory is the most recent of all of the theories. It was produced in 2009 and is very applicable to modern business. Basically, Daniel Pink's drive theory is the theory that relates best to creative, problem-solving, complex tasks. Pink is very careful to say that all workers require a decent amount of salary. They all require a fair remuneration. So although he doesn't talk about money in how you motivate people, he does say if you don't pay people what they perceive as fair, then there's no point in having any of this. But as soon as you pay people what you think is fair, if you pay people a fair remuneration, you don't then top up that pay with bonuses. Don't put a financial carrot associated to a particular task. For example, if you were to say to a worker in a job, I want you to meet these targets and to complete this particular project. And if you do it by this time, by this date, I will give you X amount of money. Okay? In that context, maybe we're talking about something very simple. Targets, okay? I know what I'm doing. I don't have to be creative in this. That's great. I've got a motivation. But what if I said to an employee, I want you to come up with a new idea. I want you to design a new product. I want you to come up with a great marketing strategy for this product. And we would like it by this amount of time. And if you do that, we will pay you this amount of money. Well, what Pink says is by tying a creative task to a financial outcome, you actually stifle creativity because you've got the worker focused on the financial outcome and not on thinking outside of the box in relation to the creative task itself. So Pink's drive theory basically says if you want people to be creative, if you want people to be problem solvers and think out of the box, then you have to provide them with these 3 steps: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, this talks about the idea, excuse me, this talks about the idea that workers have some control over what they do. They're able to delegate. They don't have micromanagement. That means somebody constantly looking over their shoulder asking what they've done. Have they met this target? Have they done this? They have a mandate to get on with their own role. They manage their own time. They choose how they do their role when they do it. In autonomy, we talk about the autonomy of the different T's: autonomy of time, autonomy of team, autonomy of task, autonomy of technique. So autonomy of time, I choose when I do it. Autonomy of team, I choose who I do it with. Autonomy of task, I choose what I do. Autonomy of technique, I choose how I do it. I have power over that. Mastery is about enabling workers to be the best, to get better, to improve. And this is comes from having the right experiences, the right support, perhaps the right training, the right tasks, the right level of task. That idea of the Goldilocks tasks. You don't want to give somebody a task that is too hard because it will turn them off motivation. And you don't want to give somebody a task that is too easy. And that whole idea of finding the right level of challenge. Purpose, understanding why we're doing this. What is my role within this task, in this department, in the company? How does the company then go full circle and benefit me in the back in the same time? You know, this could be just about understanding your role within an organization, or it could be wider than that. You know, purpose could be about the social and the environmental benefits that your project, your task, your department is giving back to society. So it can be a larger scale, but it doesn't have to. It can just be about understanding your role within the organisation. So if you've got autonomy, mastery and purpose, Pink says you can achieve motivation. And he says that this is the best way to ensure that your workers are creative and innovative and coming up with new ideas. So the last section then is to consider financial and non-financial rewards. So these are all of the different types of financial rewards. We have salary and wages. These are the two basic ones. A salary does not change from month to month. A salary means you earn this amount of money in a year and is divided between 12 months and you receive the same amount of money every month. So in the example of, let's imagine a teacher. Let's imagine a teacher earns €30,000 a year. Okay, that €30,000 a year divided by 12 will be the amount of money that they receive every month. So let's imagine they receive something like 2,700, 2,800 euros a month. 30,000 divided by 12, it'll be around there. And that amount of money will be exactly the same whether they receive their salary in August when they haven't been in school, or whether they receive their salary in January when they're up to their neck in marking and mock exams and all of this kind of stuff. So depending, it doesn't matter how busy you are, you always receive the same amount. This is really useful for businesses to be able to plan financially for cash flow. And it's good for employees as well. It gives employees a level of security in their, you know, in their personal lives, in what money's coming in and out of their own life. Wages is whereby employees are either paid for the hours that they put in or for the items that they produce. So we talked about Taylor's motivation theory. This is piece rate pay. And wages, or time-based wages, quite often found in more sort of lower level menial tasks, things like waitresses and people who work in retail, in shops, will often get paid a wage. This obviously means that the more they work, or the more hours they work, the greater their pay is. And so, you know, that can be seen as quite an equitable system. But you will often find that people who are paid a wage will not choose to put in additional hours or additional time in order to complete tasks without, you know, without the expectation that is obviously going to equal more money. Whereas obviously in a salary, you have the task to do. This is the amount you're going to get paid each month. Irrelevant. You could work a 30-hour week, you could work an 80-hour week. That's the amount you're going to get paid in that month. So commission. Commission is when employees receive a percentage of the value of a sale that they make. They usually have a base salary as well, and the commission is a top-up to this. It's quite common in luxury sales goods, things like estate agents when you're selling property. And if you sell a house worth $5 million, you know, maybe you're entitled to 0.1% commission, which will be the percentage of the value of the house as a bonus on top of your salary. Profit-related pay is when the workforce receives a bonus, usually at Christmas or maybe in the summer months, related to the fact that the organisation has made more profit than expected. So the organisation did better than expected. We're going to share some of those profits back to the employees as a thank you for what the employees have put into the business's success. Performance-related pay. This is based upon specific employees or teams of employees having met targets. So this has to be tied in some way to the appraisal system. We have to be able to have appraised our employees having had set targets, they've achieved those targets, and we're going to reward them for a specific role for a specific task. We have employee share ownership schemes. This is where businesses give the opportunity to employees to buy shares at a reduced rate, or where they gift shares to employees. This is good opportunity in small businesses that maybe don't have the cash finance available to provide financial bonus rewards to staff. They can issue share gifts, which is a financial reward, but you don't actually have to have the cash available at that moment in time. And the other thing that does, obviously, is it integrally ties the productivity of the members of staff to the success of the business, because that member of staff wants their shares to do well. The better the business does, the more the shares rise in value, the more their bonus is worth. So this is a reason why that might happen. In reality, in larger companies, this is really only offered to the highest level of employees. Senior management would have these opportunities. And lastly, we have fringe payments, otherwise known as perks. This is financial in the sense that it's worth money, but it doesn't actually come as a number in a bank account attached to your paycheck. This is the kind of gym memberships, company car, health insurance. Maybe your company pays for your children's education at a private school. Maybe your company pays for your rent or gives you a rental allowance to live locally if you've relocated. The fringe payments are the extras, the sort of little non-monetary but still financial in the sense that they're worth something. Bonuses that you get attached to your remuneration package. And then we have the non-financial rewards. So all of the motivation factors have talked about non-financial rewards, but we actually can separate them out as well. We have the job enrichment, job rotation, job enlargement, job empowerment, purpose, and teamwork. Now, I've already sort of explained enrichment, enlargement, and empowerment when I looked at Herzberg. Enrichment being the idea that we are giving staff a greater level of challenge in their current role. So more work to do at a greater level of challenge or variety. And job enlargement means just giving them more work, the same level of challenge, but more to do. Now, obviously, I think some people could argue that job enlargement is not a particularly motivating area, even though, obviously, we don't want staff to feel bored at work. We want them to feel that they have lots to do and lots of roles to complete. But the problem with job enlargement is that things can become very repetitive because it's at the same level of challenge. Job rotation is an interesting one because job rotation is sort of somewhere in between. It's an example of job enlargement, but what it literally means is that employees at a similar level of skill get to rotate different tasks and do different things. So if you imagine working in a fast food restaurant and you've got somebody who works on the tills, somebody who works on fries, somebody who works on burgers, somebody who works front of house clearing tables, each day that you come in, maybe you fulfill a different one of those roles, okay? You can't really suggest that one is more challenging than another. It's not that we're giving people more responsibility and that they are, maybe taking a step up, but they're simply rotating those skills. This is useful for business because it can be more motivating than just straight job enlargement, but also because it enables the staff to have a more flexible range of skills. So if somebody's off sick, it's easier to replace them within the available staff in the company because those skills are something that everyone has. Empowerment or job empowerment. This when we talked about Pink, we talked about autonomy, the ability to choose. That's the same thing. Empowerment and autonomy mean the same thing. Having the right to choose within your role. And you don't have to have empowerment over everything. So it's unlikely that you're going to have the autonomy of time and task and team and technique. But so long as businesses allow some level empowerment to staff, some level of control over how they do their job, the order that they do it, when they do it, etc., as long as it gets done, this is found to be a very motivating opportunity. Okay, and obviously, as it's non-financial, it doesn't come with a big bill. Purpose, again, that came under pink. This idea of understanding why I'm doing something. Just knowing why can help to improve the purpose. And so that purpose doesn't have to be a huge, great philanthropic, tool that businesses are aiming towards, but it can be. It can be, some businesses that say, okay, well, the reason that we're doing this is because not only do we want to make a really good product, but we also want to, massively reduce our carbon footprint, or we want to help eradicate, this disease, or whatever else. Having social objectives is often key to having a really great purpose, but sometimes all employees actually really need to do is to understand what their role is in the grand scheme of the business's activity. And teamwork. And teamwork came up in a few of them as well. Big motivator, according to Maslow, that sort of middle level social needs, belongingness needs, that's teamwork. So the ability to communicate with members of a team and work on a project together, to share ideas, to communicate, to ensure that you have been able to be listened to, and to listen to others, to learn from one another, is another significant motivator in the workplace. Okay, so that wraps up the second instalment of Chapter 2, and the last instalment of Chapter 2 will just look at those higher level topics of corporate culture and employee-employer relations.